Hello, my name is Caroline Fortuno, and today I will be doing a presentation on Hofstede's cultural dimensions. This is for class communication 6420, which is cultural communication. I will first cover Hofstede's value dimensions, which is just another name for the cultural dimensions. We are required to look over 4 dimensions, which is high-low power distance, individualism and collectivism, indulgence and restraint, and masculinity and femininity. So today, even though he has 6 dimensions, I will be focusing on those 4. Hofstede developed a notable system for categorizing cultural characteristics that go over perceptual and communication differences. The first dimension, power distance index, shows people's preference for hierarchies or equal relationships. So a high power distance is a strong acceptance of varying status, kind of like a hierarchy. And then low power distance is when there's a desire to minimize the inequality. Individualism versus collectivism. Individualism is when an individual is most important in a social setting, and independence is very much valued. Collectivism is when group interests are more valued. Masculinity versus femininity. For masculinity, it's the view of the society's values as male-oriented, such as being very assertive or confident. Femininity is when the society leans towards nurturing behaviors, like the desire to help others. Indulgence and restraint. This examines the society's level of giving into being able to hold back from impulses. So a weak control is considered indulgent, and then a strong control is being or showing restraint or restriction. So for the USA's cultural orientation, first the power distance, we score low, score of 41, and that basically means that we don't necessarily value hierarchy. Part of our country is really liberty and justice for all, equality, and comparing that to Mexico, we are lower and they are a lot higher in this area. For individualism versus collectivism, we did score high, a score of 60. This basically kind of runs along the same line where we value equal rights. People tend to, look after themselves and their immediate families. For masculinity and femininity, we also scored high in the USA, 62. So that basically means our culture has more of that can-do mentality. We want to succeed and we're very high achieving. Also, for indulgence versus restraint, we scored high as well, 68, which leans towards being indulgent. So again, in our society, we tend to have a work hard, play hard mentality. So we do give into those indulgences. Okay, next I'll cover Mexico's cultural orientation. For their power distance, they are actually the opposite of the United States, and they score high at an 81, meaning their culture sees hierarchy as acceptable. There's a clear understanding of everyone having a specific place in society. For individualism and collectivism, we again are opposite. Mexico is low on that end, where they're viewing society fostering strong relationships among a group, and they have a sense of responsibility for the members of the group. For masculinity versus femininity, they actually are high just like the United States. So they are very decisive, assertive, and they have a high motivation to succeed. For indulgence versus restraint, they are actually also high, but they are considered very high at a 97, where United States was at about a 60. Um, so what that tells us is they kind of see an importance of spending time and leisure time, money, as they please and as they desire. Okay, next I'll be going over the USA, and I'll be talking about two dimensions: power distance and masculinity versus femininity, and the success and struggles with those. So with the US, a success can be, since we're low power distance, that means we like to do decisions as a group or as a society, and we like for there to be a consensus. Now, the struggle can be, although there is equality and there's better communication in deciding on things, within the groups there are still subgroups or various cultural identities and experiences which can still cause differences. In masculinity versus femininity, now, as a whole, it reflects our tendency to discuss achievements and display a go-getter or can-do attitude. So we're very confident in that sense. But the struggle can definitely be the constant strive for success, which can also lead to continued inequality in our society. So for Mexico, I will also talk about the cultural dimensions of power distance and masculinity versus femininity, and success and struggles of each of those. So for power distance, if you recall, Mexico is a high power distance culture, and that typically means that responsibilities and roles of authorities is acknowledged. So in that sense, we can look at that as a success because they have this system already. Now, a struggle, this model can make it hard for those in lower levels of the hierarchy to lack a voice, and they may not be heard or seen, because there tends to be that shift of valuing the higher level folks. For masculinity versus femininity, the success can be that managers, if we're thinking about the workplace, are expected to be assertive, decisive, and ultimately pushing productivity. So I think in any workplace that can be seen as a success. However, there is a struggle. The constant strive for assertiveness can lead to conflict. And in Mexico's culture, this is usually handled through direct confrontation, which we know can cause tension or stress. Okay, next I will go over solutions to cultural struggles that we discussed. For the US, a solution to the power distance struggle, I kind of thought about something from my own personal work experience. I think various continued training should always be offered to assist with the subgroups that happen in low power distance type societies or cultures. The solution for masculinity versus femininity struggle, Andriesi et al. Discusses how in the workplace, human resources practices should be tailored in order to motivate people based on cultural differences. So even though as a whole we are pretty driven and we want to achieve and we lean more towards that masculinity, again, there's just different cultural differences within that. Continuing with the solutions for cultural struggles, for Mexico, the solution for power distance struggle, De Piero and Rea discuss that the greater the power distance, there is a perceived higher level of corruption. So empowering people to have a say and implementing actions around that can possibly be helpful and necessary. Solution for masculinity versus femininity struggle, Gu et al. Found that in feminine cultures, a stronger sense of gender equality is present. So possibly having more equity can grow towards more balanced work settings. A few other interesting findings that I just wanted to add on was that within Hofstede's cultural dimensions, it's not just that one model you'd probably want to implement when evaluating the workplace or other group settings or cultures. You would want to take into account some of the different other models that may be available to help understand the different levels of cultures. That concludes my presentation. Here are my references on the next few slides, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.